Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, hot water. This morning, President Biden facing growing fallout over classified documents found at his Delaware home and his private office. Now, lawmakers are raising questions about national security.
I think Joe Biden's going to find out that the rules do apply to him, and we're going to finally start asking questions that haven't been asked for the last few years.
The latest on the investigation underway and the reaction from both sides of the aisle. Road to recovery this morning, California assessing the damage following a series of devastating and deadly storms. We're bringing you to one of the hardest hit areas for a look at the aftermath and why the cleanup could take months or even years. Turn for the worse. New concerns this morning about another COVID surge as new strains of the virus spread across the country. We'll check in with the doctor for what you need to know to stay healthy. And the secret to happiness. Researchers say they may have finally uncovered the most important thing you need for a long and happy life. We'll tell you what it is and why it's so important, but judging by the stock images, maybe companionship?
Maybe a little bit here. There's a tease for you. If you want to know the secret to eternal happiness, just stick with us a little bit longer.
We promise not that and more.
We will bring you that.
All right, we are going to begin this morning, though, with the latest on President Biden's handling of classified material. House Republicans have called for the release of visitor logs to Biden's Delaware home after documents marked classified were found there last week.
The White House and the Secret Service both say they do not maintain visitor logs for the home because it's a private residence. A spokesman for the Secret Service says background checks are performed on those who come in contact with the Bidens at their home, but it retains such information for only a limited time. Speaking with reporters, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says he wants all the information that Republicans can get their hands on.
I think we want to collect more of the data, more of the information. Are these all the documents? Are there more out there? I mean, I know the White House tried to say it was all cleared up on Thursday. Now that we find there's more documents, I think there's a lot of questions that continue to raise, and we want to get all the information possible.
For the latest, we are joined by NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Good morning to both of you. Carol, let's start with you. So what more do we know about that lack of visitor logs and the search for any more potential documents? And how are House Republicans reacting?
Well, what we know about the lack of visitor logs is the White House says that they don't keep track of those who come and visit the president at his private residences. And they're quick to point out that that is not new, that that's something that has been the case for previous presidents as well, including former President Donald Trump and presidents before him. And so the Republicans are saying, well, OK, fine, we'll go to Secret Service and we'll ask them for their records. They clear people in to be around the president, sometimes run their social security numbers to do background checks. Secret Service says we don't keep those records internally, so we don't have those to give. Nonetheless, Republicans seem intent on pushing this issue and are going to, by all accounts, continue to make an issue out of it. Take a listen to House Majority Leader Steve Scalise.
Well, just because they said it, you don't just take their word for it. I mean, we're talking about classified documents. We're talking about when the Justice Department clearly had the knowledge of this prior to the election and sat on it. And I think Joe Biden's going to find out that the rules do apply to him, and we're going to finally start asking questions that haven't been asked for the last few years.
Now, Democrats are very quick to point out, Joe, that this is not a question that Republicans are also asking of former President Trump. They're not demanding that he turn over visitor logs for anyone who was at his Mar-a-Lago estate while classified documents were stored there where they shouldn't have been. And so the Democrats are saying, look, this is just hypocritical. Those rules, they're also not applying them even.
So, Danny, given that here, so, OK, Carol just mentioned the Mar-a-Lago case. Looking at the Biden case, what hurdles does the absence of visitor logs present to a special counsel?
I rather think the absence of visitor logs was a tactic by Republicans, and here's why. They had to know that the Secret Service doesn't keep particularly good records, especially for a vice president. Consider this. Under federal law, you may be surprised to learn that vice presidents don't get lifetime Secret Service protection after they leave office. It's only 6 months. So doing the math, there's at least 3.5 years during the Trump administration where there arguably was zero Secret Service oversight of the Biden home. So unless the documents all got down their during President Biden's current term, there is very likely a window of zero oversight on President Biden's home. So I rather think this was a tactic that was already known to Republicans before they even requested the logs for the home. Now, does it complicate matters? Not so much. There's still many other digital ways to get evidence, whether it be searching emails, communications, things like that. The visitor logs would have been helpful, but they're not absolutely essential.
Carol, we know the White House has said it's cooperating with the DOJ ever since we first learned about the first batch of documents, which were discovered last November but came to light much more recently. What's the Biden administration saying now about the GOP's call for more information?
Well, Joe, yesterday we saw the White House hit back pretty hard against Republicans, particularly for making an issue of this visitor logs, this question of visitor logs, which presumably, as Danny just said, the House Republicans know that the Secret Service wouldn't keep and that presidents don't keep. So what the White House is saying is that Republicans have zero credibility here, that their demands should be met with skepticism, that they're basically being hypocritical in the sense that they're asking for things of President Biden that they haven't called on former President Trump to deliver. I'll read you part of a statement from Ian Sams. He's a White House spokesperson. And in his statement, he said President Biden is doing the right thing and is cooperating fully with a thorough review, but House Republicans are playing politics in a shamelessly hypocritical attempt to attack President Biden. So you can see the White House, while they're maintaining the position that they can't speak to the specifics of the documents, some details of the timeline and things like that, they are willing to get in it and play the politics part of this and push back there where Republicans are demanding things that the White House is basically saying are unreasonable.
And Danny, are we essentially conflating kind of two different things here? Because on one hand, you have a national security damage assessment, which maybe visitor logs would be very helpful for that. But the special counsel is looking at specific questions, right? Like, who let these documents get out of the SCIF? Why were they there? I mean, are those two very different things?
There are two major prongs the special counsel is looking into. Number one, how did the documents get there? That includes what are the documents? What is the universe? Because there are several different classifications of these documents, everything from top secret SCI to confidential. So that assessment needs to be made. And then afterward, where the Biden team scores very well, is what did they do once the documents were found? There, as you know, the Trump team scores very poorly because they fought tooth and nail, whereas the Biden team came forward with this information. And I say the Biden team because Biden himself has not done a lot of favors for his team by some of the remarks he's made. For example, saying, and I'm paraphrasing, hey, the documents, it's not like they were on the street. They're in my garage next to the Corvette. I did a little research, by the way, and it's an old study, but do you know the most stolen classic car is the Corvette? So, look, having a Corvette itself arguably is an invitation for people to come break into your garage. Not a good idea for Biden to sound glib about, hey, the documents are fine, no biggie. It is a biggie, and it's the kind of thing that he probably should have just let his team handle because they were doing brilliantly.
All sorts of information we are learning here from Danny and Carol. Thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
People in California are finally getting a bit of reprieve after more than 2.5 weeks of rain and snow. The forecast appears to be clearing up, but there is a lot of difficult work ahead. Homeowners and business owners in cities across the state are now assessing the damage and starting the cleanup. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin joins us now from Capitola Beach, California. Dana, the forecast here, it appears to be drying up, of course, after that extra round of rain yesterday. We know flooding, mudslides, landslides, those have all been an issue. Any reports of anything like that overnight?
Nothing major to that extent overnight, Lindsay, but I can tell you that there is still a flood advisory in Santa Cruz County near the Salinas River, and that's going to last until about 9 o'clock this morning. And I think the bigger issue right now is the lingering impacts. You've got saturated soil. So officials are really concerned about downed trees, possible landslides that could come even days after, the rain has moved out. We did get some snow in the Sierra. Forecasters predict between 18 to 24 inches, but that storm has since moved east. So the good news is things are starting to dry out, like you just mentioned.
You're in Capitola Beach, where property owners and business owners are just now beginning to assess the damage. What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, you may be able to see behind me, there's a dumpster full of debris. We started seeing crews clean out some of these businesses that are along the beachfront because they got hit with waves and wind. Some of them have broken windows. Part of the Capitola Wharf, a chunk of it is now sitting inside the dining room of one of those businesses. We actually got a tour inside a few restaurants here. One of the business owners walked us through some of the damage. Take a listen.
The waves came right through here and into the restaurant. So this was our deck when you walked in, and this got blown up and was out in the middle of the street. That's how hard the waves hit. And I was sitting at home, and I knew the king tide was happening, and I'm watching on the video, and all of a sudden you just see a wave, the camera's inside, the wave just come all the way up and hit the fan. Unbelievable power.
Yeah, and the floorboards in there are just kind of like ripped to shreds because of the water that kept coming underneath this building. This particular business owner is hoping that he can get everything cleaned up and restored by spring break because this is a tourist area and they really rely heavily on the tourism industry to kind of help keep them afloat, Lindsay.
Wow, so much damage there. So, Dana, what about this federal aid? What is it for and how can people apply?
So that's the tricky question. Even that business owner says that he's really frustrated because he hasn't received any information as far as how he can even get the process started. We know that that federal aid money is going to go to counties like Merced, Santa Cruz, and Sacramento. But the good news is President Biden is expected to tour some of these devastated areas on Thursday. So we're hoping to get a little more information about how much funding is going to be provided for California and how business owners can start the process. I even spoke with the Santa Cruz County Emergency Management Director for this area, and he tells me that there are at least 1,000 residents and homeowners that are going to need that money for flooding damage to their businesses and homes. Lindsay?
Dana Griffin, thanks so much.
Time now for a check on the weather forecast and the cross-country storm expected through the west and into the plains this week.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is in for Angie with the latest. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you guys. Yeah, we're going to be watching that cross-country storm move east. It's going to bring lots of stuff. It's going to bring some rain, some wind, some snow, even the chance of severe weather by tomorrow. First, so let's start out in the west because we are getting a little bit of a break today after seeing so many images of flooded roadways, mudslides, landslides, washed out roadways. The historical storm does continue. It's heartbreaking, and we are going to continue to see one last push. Not today. We get dry weather today. That's good news. And then there is that last push. It comes in tonight into tomorrow. We're not expecting a whole lot of moisture. It's going to be a quick mover as well. That's good news. But still, any more amount of rain on top of these soggy grounds, that's going to cause some problems. Most of the moisture is going to stay up to the northern parts of California into the Pacific Northwest. So I think we'll keep Southern California dry. But this is a look at tomorrow. Light amounts for Northern California. And we should keep the south dry. We could maybe see a few showers. That's going to push inland on Thursday, and that's going to move into the Great Basin. But here's our cross-country storm. It's a big one. We're looking at 19 million people impacted at this point. We have winter alerts stretching from the southwest into the central plains, into portions of New England. Where you see the pink, that is a winter storm warning. And we're going to see heavy snow throughout the Rockies tonight into tomorrow, and also portions of the central plains. That's on the cold side. Notice where you see these pinks and purples. So Denver, North Platte, that's where we're going to see heavy snow. It's going to cause really tricky travel in those parts of the country. We'll be tracking that for you tomorrow. And this is what it looks like. That area of low pressure moving out of the Rockies as we go throughout the day, bringing that heavy snow and slow travel. Scattered rain showers for Texas, also New Mexico. And then tomorrow, this is going to be an active day. This is where it sort of encounters that really warm, humid air. So we are looking at the chance of some severe storms. We're not expecting a tornado outbreak like what we saw last week, but still could see some isolated tornadoes. We're going to see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour and also some hail. So we're going to track that for you. Also really warm temperatures ahead of this storm as well. Back to you guys.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Concern is mounting this morning over a new COVID subvariant that is rapidly spreading across the country. New CDC numbers show that the strain accounted for at least 43% of confirmed cases over the past week. So what do you need to know? Joining us now with some answers, no one better than NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Doctor, good morning to you. So this new strain is being called the Kraken variant. So we're getting a little more dramatic with the names here. Officials here in New York say it now represents close to 73% of cases. So how worried should we be about another surge?
Yeah, Joe and Lindsay, you should always be worried when we're naming things after mythical creatures, but Kraken, putting the name aside, it is one of the most genetically transmissible and kind of antibody resistant variants that we've seen to date, which is why the World Health Organization and the CDC and basically all the countries around the globe are trying to call attention to it and just remind people that the basics here work when we're trying to protect ourselves.
So, yeah, I want to emphasize what you just said. In a new report, the World Health Organization called this new variant the, quote, most antibody resistant to date. So how will that impact people who do catch it? Could it affect them more severely compared to previous strains we've seen? And how do the vaccines maybe play into all this?
Yeah, all great questions. Number one, we don't know whether it is, quote unquote, more severe. It takes, unfortunately, kind of going through a surge and then really looking at the data. But we do know, especially with New York data and what we're seeing around the world, that it can equally hospitalize and kill immunocompromised and elderly people as other Omicron variants did. So we know that it is at least on par with the lethality or the ability to kill that other variants had. Then to the next question about vaccines. Lots of studies have been put together to look at our current updated bivalent booster vaccine, and it performs modestly, about 30% effectiveness, and that's still a number that's kind of in a calculation stage, again, because not everybody's had the bivalent booster, but that is really lower effectiveness than I would like to see with an updated booster. However, it's still better performing than the original series of vaccines. So getting updated is better than not, but we know that it might not be enough to protect you, especially if you're older or have chronic conditions that put you at high risk.
So Dr. Patel, we live in this world now where people have returned to relatively normal life, not a lot of mask wearing, people are going out and socializing. Right. So considering that, but also what we're starting to see right now with this variant, what are the best things to do to protect yourself against the new variant?
Yeah, it's all the basics as we know and have been talking about for years now, but on top of just keeping just a little more extra consciousness, staying home when you're sick, all of those things, I just want to put in another reminder that at least our antiviral treatments, specifically Paxlovid, which is in pill form, it's something that you can check with your doctor, especially if you're 12 and above and you're eligible for it. This is something to remind people that if you do get it, that there are options and that there are places to go, that you can at least online get these medications, try to protect yourself if you do get the virus, and then isolate yourself because we do know this is incredibly contagious. And that reminder, as you said, if you're not feeling well, we still want you to stay home. You can work from home. You can do whatever. All right. Dr. Kavita Patel, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is calling on the West to speed up its weapons supplies and amid heavy fighting across the country. The plea comes as rescue workers continue to sift through the rubble of an apartment block destroyed by a Russian missile attack over the weekend. At least 44 bodies have been found. Dozens more remain missing. And in the midst of all of this, the head of a private Russian mercenary group is declaring victory in Soledar. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley takes a closer look at Moscow's power politics from the ruins of eastern Ukraine. And a warning, some scenes in this report might be distressing.
Russia's assault on Soledar left this town broken. But it also broke into the open infighting in the Kremlin's upper ranks between an oligarch whose private army led Russia to victory and a military establishment that appears to want him sidelined. Military analysts said Yevgeny Prigozhin has turned eastern Ukraine into a vicious vanity project to advance his own political ambitions. 3 days before the Russian government claimed to have conquered Soledar, a claim Kyiv has denied, Prigozhin said he was in the salt mines under the city, boasting online that victory was his and his private armies alone, while roasting Russia's military, who he said hadn't helped. His mercenaries hoisted not Russia's flag, but the Wagner Group's own colors over this battered town. If Moscow's grateful for a rare victory, they had a funny way of showing it. Even as the battle raged in Soledar, Putin shuffled his top military ranks, demoting one of Prigozhin's allies. Do you think that this shakeup was an attempt to try to sideline Prigozhin?
The target is to neutralize Prigozhin, especially among the Russian population.
So who is this shadowy figure? A former convict, he restarted his career as a caterer to the Kremlin, known as Putin's chef. But soon he was leading a private army, doing Russia's dirty work in places like Syria, Libya, and Mali, where his soldiers have been accused of war crimes. But it was Ukraine that put him in the public eye. To lead the fight in Ukraine's east, he needed more men. He found them among Russia's most desperate, recruiting convicts direct from prisons with promises of pardons.
The first sin is desertion. No one goes back. No one backs down. No one surrenders.
Ukrainians call his style of fighting meat waves, sending wave after wave of poorly trained and equipped convicts straight into Ukrainian defenses. The self-promoting Prigozhin showcases every stage of his human meat grinder, addressing his mercenaries on the front lines, demanding even his amputee troops return to the front.
If another mine explodes, then the iron leg will be torn off and a new one will be welded.
To finally sending them home in body bags.
Their contract is over. They're going home.
But Ukrainian and American officials say these battles have little strategic value. The victory is for Prigozhin himself. Do you think that Prigozhin is doing all of this in Soledar and Bakhmut in order to further his own political ambitions?
I would say that's the case, in particular, strengthening his position in the apparatus that surrounds Putin.
Climbing the Kremlin's ranks over the corpses of his own soldiers. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Coming up on Morning News Now, an alarming case of mistaken identity, which lands an innocent woman in jail for days.
After the break, more on the mix-up that police are calling an unfortunate mistake.
We're back with a case of mistaken identity. A Philadelphia woman was wrongly arrested and spent almost a week in jail after she was mistaken as a shoplifting suspect in Texas. NBC News correspondent George Solis brings us that story.
We love you, Julie! Yes!
Most reunions are cause for celebration, but for Julie Hudson, this one came after being wrongfully jailed for nearly a week after a shocking case of mistaken identity.
I had a lot of anxiety. I was scared. I didn't know what I was going to do. It felt like it wasn't going to end.
The 31-year-old PhD student accused of shoplifting more than 1,500 miles away in Webster, Texas.
When you know that you didn't do anything wrong, and it makes you feel crazy.
Back in May, authorities in Webster mistakenly linked her to a sporting goods store shoplifting case. According to NBC Houston's affiliate, police say the suspect seen in this surveillance photo is also named Julie Hudson. Investigators found a Julie Hudson in Philadelphia on social media and determined the two were a match, even though they are two different people. They even convinced a judge to issue a warrant for the Philadelphia Hudson's arrest.
Did look to multiple different people, not just within our agency, but also with the district attorney's office.
How do you go from a photo on social media to an arrest warrant?
It may surprise some people to learn that when the police accidentally arrest the wrong person, they may not be civilly liable as long as their mistaken belief was reasonable under the circumstances.
Hudson says she only found out she had an outstanding warrant because it was preventing her from getting jobs. When she went to police to set the record straight, she was arrested immediately, taken into custody.
Her demeanor was distraught and traumatized.
Her family spent days reaching out to authorities and the media in both cities.
We love you.
6 days later, she was finally released, according to Texas's Harris County DA and her family. But the damage was already done. Philly's DA offering an apology on behalf of law enforcement, but also pointing the finger of blame at Texas authorities.
I certainly hope and I trust that Texas will take a serious look at what it did in this case.
In a statement, the Harris County DA said in part, "We accept the charges based on the sworn evidence presented to us by law enforcement. Webster police notified the court of the error. We dismissed the case within 5 minutes and immediately contacted Philadelphia police to release our hold on Miss Hudson." The Webster police telling Houston's KPRC her arrest was an unfortunate mistake.
Miss Hudson may bring a number of other state-based claims like false imprisonment. She might have a case, but it's always really hard to sue the police, even when they make a big mistake like this.
Julie Hudson still has questions, and apologies may not be enough.
I want to find out what happened. I want to find out how this happened, and I want it to not happen to anyone else ever again.
Our thanks to George Solis for that report. Hudson's family says they are considering legal action, but have not yet released any other details.
In China, experts are sounding the alarm over new figures that point to a falling population. Official data shows China's population fell for the first time in 6 decades last year, dropping by roughly 850,000. Experts say the demographic shift could have a negative impact on its economy and even the world's economy. Now to a story that sounds like it was ripped from the pages of a Hollywood script. A trip to the doctor ended up being the end of the line for one Mafia kingpin in Sicily. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobiea explains.
Hiding in plain sight, notorious Mafia boss Matteo Messina Denaro led out of a private medical clinic in the Sicilian capital, Palermo, under arrest as people cheered. The 60-year-old alleged leader of the infamous Sicilian crime group Cosa Nostra was Italy's most wanted fugitive, eluding police for 3 decades. Italy's prime minister calling it a hard blow to organized crime. Messina Denaro was tried, convicted, and sentenced in absentia to life in prison 20 years ago for the murders of anti-mafia prosecutors in 1992, deadly bomb attacks in Milan, Florence, and Rome a year later, and the kidnapping, torture, and murder of a 12-year-old boy. Prosecutors say they recently learned Messina Denaro was ill and tracked him to the clinic in Palermo where he was being treated under an alias. His health issue forced him to come out in the open, the Palermo prosecutor said, adding he didn't look like a broken man and was wearing a $37,000 watch. His arrest comes after the capture of another mob boss, Rocco Morabito, in Brazil last year after 28 years on the run.
And that was Kelly Kobiea reporting. Investigators say Messina Denaro is being questioned at a secret location. Officials hope after 30 years on the run, he'll break the Mafia code of silence and cooperate. Coming up, caught on camera, an unattended toddler seen waving a loaded gun in front of his home. Now the boy's father is under arrest. What we know about what happened.
Plus, you may have heard the saying, a cluttered room is a sign of a cluttered mind. Well, we're going to talk to a professional about the link between mental health and messiness. It's coming up next on Morning News Now.
Disturbing new video shows a toddler waving a loaded gun outside his Indiana apartment. The scene and the arrest of the child's father playing out on live TV during a reality show following police on patrol. It's just the latest incident that has parents worried about children's safety at home and in school. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has the story.
Another disturbing example of young children carrying deadly firepower. This time, shocking video of a toddler wielding a gun in Indiana. A neighbor's Ring camera capturing the young boy waving what appears to be a gun and pulling the trigger multiple times. Before he walks back into his apartment saying, "Mommy." The heart-stopping scare playing out on Real's show On Patrol Live, a reality program following police when they were called to the scene. Officers at one point asking the child where he put the weapon.
Where'd you put down that toy?
Then searching for the gun.
Control Beachcraft 36, you're in a firearm for me.
The police incident report later confirming it was loaded. Officers arresting the child's father, Shane Osborne, for neglect of a dependent. NBC News reached out to Osborne. So far, no response. In the video, he said the gun wasn't his.
I've never brought a gun in this house.
Something police have not confirmed. This just the latest incident of a minor brandishing a firearm, happening only days after a Virginia 6-year-old shot his teacher on school grounds.
The round went through her hand, exited the rear of her hand, and into her upper chest.
In a virtual town hall, officials say at least one administrator knew the student may have had a weapon on him and searched his backpack, but didn't prevent the shooting. According to police, the gun was legally purchased by the shooter's mother. They're looking into whether it was properly secured and haven't ruled out charges.
If the teachers don't believe they're being heard and the students and the teachers don't feel they're safe, they can't teach and they can't learn.
The district taking steps to try and ease fears.
Walk-through metal detectors will be in place and used for all students, faculty, staff, and visitors.
School there remaining closed for a second week. Advocates argue the incidents highlight a widespread risk. Nationwide, the number of school shootings per year has risen steadily since 2010, with a sharp spike in 2021, the last full year for which data was available.
You guys need to be responsible.
That fear boiling over at a Kentucky school board meeting. Parents outraged that a 14-year-old who allegedly posted online death threats against classmates and teachers last October is now returning to school. Desperate pleas to overturn that decision.
Whatever help he has gotten, he is still a threat to be in an environment which fostered him to want to do a mass shooting and make a list of our students.
This man saying his child was on the hit list.
All I could think about was my child in danger when they did nothing wrong.
The teen has been charged with second-degree terroristic threats. The status of those charges is unclear at this time. Just another case in a country struggling to keep schools and kids safe.
Our thanks to Maggie Vespa for that report. So back to that Virginia case involving the 6-year-old. As Maggie mentioned, police are still weighing charges, but so far we have not heard from the parents of the child involved.
It is time now for our weekly mental health check-in. We're taking a closer look at racial battle fatigue. We'll explain what that is and how it's taking a toll on people of color.
And plus, TikTok is shedding light on a phenomenon many people suffer from: depression rooms.
All right, let's bring in Dr. George James, a friend of our show. He joined us for more on these headlines and is a licensed marriage and family therapist at Counsel for Relationships. Dr. James, always good to have you with us. Let's start with that fatigue we mentioned earlier, racial battle fatigue. So what causes it? How does it impact mental health among people of color, specifically black people? And then what can we do about it to protect our mental health?
Yeah, so racial battle fatigue is actually the cumulative effect of just of racism, of racist injustices that people could experience, from microaggressions to minor events. And so that means like the buildup of events over time that people experience, especially when there might be educators at predominantly white institutions, and it becomes just overwhelming over time, and they become fatigued, depressed, anxious to even show up to work. And it's a really overwhelming thing that lots of people of color feel even before they enter into their work day.
What can people do about that?
So one of the things that people can do is being able to have community. Sometimes you can feel so isolated when you're in these situations. You feel like you're by yourself. You feel like there's no one around. You can also get some exercise that can also be helpful, and practice mindfulness and ways to affirm yourself. These are things that can really support you when you do feel fatigued and overwhelmed because of the racist experiences you might have.
Okay, Dr. James, we're going to ask about this other topic that we mentioned, and that is TikTok users taking us inside their rooms to show us what they're calling their depression rooms or doom piles. This is really interesting here. There's long been a link between messiness and mental health.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there has been a long link between messiness and mental health. And sometimes what we will see is that the messier our rooms might be, or our places might be, that might also be a sign of what we're experiencing, that we could be experiencing some depression, as well as just being overwhelmed. And so these depression rooms are people who are saying that, like, maybe I'm not in a good place and I have to force myself to try to clean this up, or that I might need help from those around me. So they've been recording these videos of them cleaning up these rooms because they feel like that might be the way that I can get this done. But our rooms and our places can be an example of how we feel.
Interesting. All right. Finally, Dr. James, we want to ask you about a story we teased at the top of the hour. The Harvard study of adult development has been tracking people for 85 years to see if they can find the true key to happiness and healthiness in life. Now, researchers say they may have the answer: good relationships. So why are those interpersonal connections so important for a long and happy life?
You know, we've long learned that sometimes when people get married, that can be helpful for life expectancy, for happiness, especially when there's a really good connection. And it's the ability to weather life's ups and downs, to know that you have someone that you can be connected to be able to look back on some of those memories and know that you've had a good time. Because once again, sometimes when we look at our memories, we can slightly start to forget things or rearrange things. But with a nice connection, a loving connection, those memories can be positive, and that can also impact our mood. So it's just great to have good connections, good friends, good family, good partners that we can connect to because it can benefit us as we go forward.
Those connections are so important. Dr. George James, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We were right about those stock images.
There you go. Exactly. They were right on. Coming up, a spending showdown shaping up on Capitol Hill.
The U.S. about to hit the debt ceiling. Now it's a race against the clock to raise it. The latest on the negotiations when we come back. This is Morning News Now.
We're back with a closer look at the story of embattled Congressman George Santos. It's getting a lot of attention now, but the drama actually all started in September, 2 months before the midterms, when a Long Island newspaper published an expose on then congressional candidate Santos. So even with his fabricated background, how was he able to deceive so many people and get elected? NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale takes a closer look.
It began as so many political stories do. A newcomer with a background in finance making the jump to Congress. But
more defiance tonight from embattled New York Congressman George Santos.
That wasn't actually George Santos's story. After Election Day, it became clear that nearly his whole pitch to voters wasn't true. He never went to a prestigious New York private school, nor did he attend Baruch College. He also wasn't the star of that college's volleyball team. He didn't work at Citigroup or Goldman Sachs, though he told voters he did. He touted his Jewish heritage. Emphasis on the ish, as it turns out.
As I always joke, I'm Jew-ish. My mother's family is Jewish. I grew up and I was raised Roman Catholic.
Only one media outlet was onto Santos before the election, a Long Island newspaper called the North Shore Leader.
How did we not know this stuff? But you guys did.
Well, we did. I mean, we broke the story back in September. And we really knew he was a fraudster for months prior to that. We expected other people to go and dig. And I mean, they did, but not until months later.
Santos copped to embellishments, but told the New York Times he did nothing unethical and apologized on Fox News.
I made a mistake. I'm having to admit this in national television for the whole country to see, and I have the courage to do so.
But in a Congress where every vote counts, Santos was key to Speaker Kevin McCarthy's victory, which may be partly why he's keen to let the issue play out.
The voters of his district have elected him. He is seated. He is part of the Republican conference.
Meanwhile, campaign finance watchdog groups and members of Congress are raising red flags about how he financed his campaign. According to a complaint the Campaign Legal Center filed to the Federal Election Commission, Santos had only $55,000 to his name in 2020. But in 2022, loaned his campaign more than $700,000. The Campaign Legal Center calling his new windfall, quote, vague, uncorroborated, and non-credible in light of his many previous lies. NBC News reached out to Santos's office about the filing, but didn't receive a response. Now, back home in Nassau County, Republican leaders want him gone.
George Santos's campaign last year was a campaign of deceit, lies, and fabrication.
And 8 congressional Republican lawmakers now echoing that demand. But Santos?
But I was elected by 142,000 people. Until those same 142,000 people tell me they don't want me, we'll find out in 2 years.
Some voters telling him exactly that.
I want this man out. This is as low as you get. I mean, really, this is beyond reproach.
But it may be 2 long years until the voters' voices are heard.
If you are a Republican, you should be outraged that that represents you. And McCarthy, I don't care if you want his vote, you're losing all the other people's votes.
That was Ali Vitale reporting. Now, the New York Times is reporting that Santos's background check flagged a pattern of deception, which led some staff members to quit in protest. The Times says it's unclear if Republican leaders in D.C. and New York knew about that. Now to the spending showdown on Capitol Hill. The clock is ticking as the U.S. inches closer and closer to the debt ceiling.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen notified Congress that the U.S. will hit the debt limit on Thursday and asked House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to either suspend or increase it. But on Sunday, McCarthy said he wants spending cuts in exchange for raising the debt limit.
For more on this, we are joined by New York Times Federal Reserve and economy reporter Gina Smilik. Gina, thanks so much for joining us. So first off, let's start with the basics. I remember years ago when I worked in local news, I tried to do a story to explain what the debt ceiling is. It involved using Post-it notes on a ceiling and shooting the story on a ceiling. That was the best I could do. Maybe you can do it a little better. Help us understand what the debt ceiling is as we get ready for this debate.
Right. This is the authorization for the Treasury to borrow money to pay bills that the United States has already incurred. And so your viewers will doubtless remember that every few years we have a debate about whether to raise it. And it's typically the case that Republicans will try to attach some sort of spending cuts going forward to that decision. And Democrats will push back and try and get a debt ceiling raised that doesn't involve those kinds of stipulations. We're clearly seeing that play out this time. The date this week is sort of the starting gun for this debate. So on Thursday, we'll hit the limit. The Treasury can then use what we call extraordinary measures, which are basically accounting tricks that allow the Treasury to continue to borrow. And we expect those to last at least until June. Most Wall Street economists are thinking more like August, potentially. It all kind of depends on tax receipts and how the math shakes out. And then at that point, we get to the point where we really just can't get around this debt limit anymore. And the government either has to come to some sort of agreement or risk defaulting on its debts.
So 2 questions, Gina. First off, what's at stake when we reach the debt ceiling? And then is that date to really look for, is that Thursday or is that around June when you're talking about?
I think the date to really look for is that one in June. So I think the way to think about what happens on Thursday is this really kicks off debt ceiling season. You know, we're going to start talking about this a lot more. You're going to hear a lot about it in the coming months. But I think the date that those extraordinary measures runs out, that's when we get into that danger zone. You know, if we get to that point without some sort of agreement, that's where you could really see market dislocations. Last time that this went down to the wire in 2011, we saw a big sell-off in stocks. Stock prices just plummeted. And that's the point at which, you know, economists say we're really playing with fire, because we could get to the point where people stop trusting the U.S. government to make good on its debts, and that could increase our cost of borrowing.
So what needs to happen to avoid reaching that debt ceiling? Where do things stand right now on those negotiations?
Yes, they stand at a pretty contentious place. So we need to get a lot of progress between now and then. It seems pretty clear that Republicans are bent on attaching some sort of spending cuts, some sort of concessions to this deal. Democrats are really not willing to negotiate on that, and they don't have a lot of reason to. You know, Republicans are sort of, you know, in a position where they want to attach some sort of stipulations here, and Democrats are in a position where if that ends badly, they can kind of point at Republicans and say, hey, you know, they didn't negotiate, or they weren't willing to pass the deal. And so we are sort of set up for some pretty politically contentious fights here. A lot of the economists and investors I talk to, I've been talking to them all weekend, are really worried that we could see a situation where this goes down to the wire like in 2011. And some are even worried that we could see a real mistake where we actually end up defaulting on government payments, which would really put us in totally uncharted waters.
Wow. All right, Gina Smialik, I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot from now until June. Thanks so much.
More money headlines now. A recent survey found people are not hopeful when it comes to their economic futures.
NBC's Silvana Hanau joins us now with more. Good morning, Silvana.
Hey guys, good morning to you. Yeah, so people are more gloomy about their economic prospects than ever before and trust business far more than governments, nonprofits, and the media. Those are the findings, the main findings of a survey from PR firm Edelman, released to coincide with the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this week. The survey shows fewer people believe their families will be better off in 5 years. Edelman's Trust Barometer also says 62% see businesses as both competent and ethical. That compares with 59% for non-government agencies, 51% for governments, and 50% for the media. Netflix is rolling out an upgraded interface for the iPhone version of the app. It features more fluid animations, including effects to move elements around as a user moves their phone. When you open the app, you'll see a big card promoting a movie or a series. It's also easier to filter content by category, switch between profiles, and use search no matter what part of the app you're currently browsing. And TikTok is proposing a major revamp as it tries to keep operating right here in the U.S. The Wall Street Journal reports TikTok is offering to have an independent monitor check the app's algorithm, and this to determine whether the Chinese government is accessing Americans' user data. That monitor would report to U.S. regulators instead of TikTok's parent company ByteDance. Federal and state lawmakers have moved to ban TikTok on government devices, and Congress is considering a bill to ban the app, guys.
Developing situation there. All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
This morning, a 14-year-old mechanic is saying goodbye to gasoline, turning to a classic car into an electrifying ride, and documenting the process on her YouTube page called Tinkergineering. NBC News Now correspondent Valerie Castro reports.
All right, you guys are probably wondering why I'm sitting on a stack of tires with this car behind me.
14-year-old Frances Farnham can't legally drive yet.
So here's like the steering wheel. We have the windshield wiper thingy-mabobbers.
But this teenage tinkerer already has a wealth of automotive know-how.
So I wanted the Porsche because, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And why would I not want a Porsche? Porsches are amazing.
Her passion project, inspired by record high gas prices, restoring this classic Porsche 914.
I really loved like the classic body style, and the Porsche 914, like just the pop-up headlights and stuff. It's just such a unique car.
The entry-level model from the 70s, affordable, lightweight, and aerodynamic, making it a popular pick for car enthusiasts who transform it from gas guzzler to a clean EV.
And I wanted to do this to cut pollution and create awareness that kids my age can make a difference.
Farnham sharing her restoration journey online through her YouTube page, Tinkergineering.
I definitely learned something new today.
Getting some help from adults with welding, sanding, and painting.
I am not the only one doing this. I am getting help. If you guys are wondering, my dad's helping me.
But raising money to buy the car, that was all Farnham and her cash crop.
So I bought this car with the money I gained from selling grapefruit as part of a co-op. So I picked the grapefruit, and then I put it in a bin, and then we sold it.
The car isn't done yet, but she's already receiving recognition for her hard work.
Guess what just happened? My car just won the Diamond in the Rough Awards. This is the best work in progress.
Farnham now hoping her car restoration story can be a spark plug for other young tinkerers.
I really want to be able to leave this earth better than I found it, and also just be able to inspire like other kids my age and even younger to that they don't have to be an adult to make change. Like they can make change now.
Driving home the point that sustainable change should have style. Valerie Castro, NBC News.
Coming up, a message in a bottle discovered 40 years after being tossed out to sea.
Up next, how the family that found it was able to track down the person who wrote it decades ago. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. NBC revealed the logo for the 2024 Paris Summer Games with the help of a different Paris. Paris Hilton made a cameo in the teaser, debuting the design. In the ad, a Frenchman announces the eyes of the world will be on, with Hilton then answering Paris. In an outtake, she even gave one of her favorite phrases, a take on that, a new twist, saying Olympics in Paris, c'est chaud. Of course, that's French for that's hot. The Paris Games start in July 2024. Now the big question, will Paris Hilton compete in the Paris Games?
I'm so glad I got to hear you say her catchphrase in French and in English.
C'est chaud.
Thanks, Joe. And finally, the mystery over one family's intriguing discovery. Who threw a message in a bottle out to sea nearly 40 years ago? NBC News Now anchor Hallie Jackson has the story.
The Carmax family couldn't believe it when they saw the note inside this old Pepsi bottle that washed up in a Florida lagoon.
Like a rotten, stinky egg.
A couple of teachers cleaning up after Hurricane Nicole had spotted it and passed it along.
We carefully tried taking the top of the bottle off and getting it out without damaging the bottle.
The message had Troy's phone number and house address, and it was really exciting.
So who was this guy, Troy from Kentucky?
I'm Troy Heller, and I live in Mount Washington, Kentucky.
At just 10 years old, he'd tossed the letter and bottle in the water at Vero Beach in 1985.
My grandpa and I, we walked to the end of the pier, threw it off.
Never knowing it would float 14 miles over the course of almost 4 decades.
Do you remember what the note said?
I wrote, whoever finds this, call me or write to me.
The Carmaxes wanted to, but they only had a name, a number, and Google. So after some serious sleuthing, they sent a message of their own. Text, not bottle.
I couldn't believe it. For them to actually take the time to seek me out and find it. I mean, it has brought me so much joy, my family so much joy.
Inspiration for the next generation.
I would love to throw a message in a bottle because maybe somebody will find it and text us, and maybe they can make a message in a bottle to send out to the next person.
A mystery that started with a good note and ended on one. Hallie Jackson, NBC News.
That makes me want to go write a letter and throw it in the Hudson.
Why not? We're grown adults.
She'll just throw it back at me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That or a piece of trash.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.